Pretty picture of the Capitol there, and somewhere inside that Capitol is our next guest, making her way up the stairs as we speak. She's one of only 4 Republican lawmakers who helped force a vote to release all of the files in the investigation of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the House is expected to vote next week on a bill to release the files after a bipartisan petition to force the vote finally got enough signatures. And all of it comes after a new batch of Epstein's private emails were released, a batch that mentions President Trump multiple times. Some GOP leaders and the president oppose the release of these documents, and the president denies any wrongdoing, hasn't been accused of wrongdoing. Only on CBS Mornings, we are joined now by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning to you. I want to begin with the release of the Epstein files, the vote to release those files. You are on the side of releasing them, and you're on that side despite President Trump saying that only a very bad or stupid Republican would be standing where you are. Why is this so important to you?
All right, people. John, here's something big just broke. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's most loyal defenders, has turned against him in a stunning rupture within the MAGA movement. Her break is unexpected and devastating, coming from inside the inner circle rather than from any Democratic opponent. According to Greene's own account, which she has shared publicly in interviews and on social media, her relationship with Trump fractured over a single issue that she believed in passionately: the release of the Epstein case files. She pushed him to fully declassify and release everything related to Jeffrey Epstein's extensive network of abuse and trafficking. She stood with survivors who had endured unimaginable horrors. And when she brought this to Trump, when she pressed him to do what she saw as the right thing,
it's for the victims. These women have been waiting, some of them for decades. I talked to several victims that were raped by Jeffrey Epstein back in the 90s. And so this is information that has needed to come out for a very long time. And the American people have demanded it. And so the American people deserve to see transparency from their government. Rich, powerful people should not be protected. That is completely wrong. And it's a message to victims everywhere, victims of rape, human trafficking, and children who are trapped in terrible situations, that the government will not protect the predators, that we will work hard to protect the victims.
So, Congresswoman, that all sounds reasonable. A lot of people agree with you. And so the question comes to mind, why is GOP leadership and the president himself so opposed to letting these files be released? As the Wall Street Journal put it, he looks like he has something to hide, even if he doesn't. So put on your political hat here. Why is he so opposed?
She claims his response was immediate and furious. He yelled at her. He told her to drop it. And when she refused to back down, when she asked him directly why he was so determined to keep those files hidden, she says he gave her an answer that stopped her cold. My friends will get hurt. Let that land for a moment. Not a legal justification, not a national security concern, not a procedural objection. My friends will get hurt. According to Greene, Trump's opposition to releasing the Epstein files wasn't about protecting an investigation or safeguarding classified information. It was about shielding specific individuals in his personal orbit from the consequences of exposure. That's an admission so damning that it's almost hard to believe.
Well, you know, I've talked to many of the women, and the women themselves have said that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. And even their attorney said that Donald Trump was the only one that helped them. So I'll just being very honest with you, it's something that I don't understand. I think it's a huge miscalculation. And I truly just stand with the women, and I think they deserve to be the ones that we're fighting for.
You can understand, Congresswoman, how in the absence of a compelling why, a reason from the White House, people jump to conclusions and assume the president must be implicated in some way. And then we have all of this new information that came out both from Republicans and Democrats. I know you were going through it as of Wednesday. I'll just highlight one email that's getting a lot of attention here. It's from Jeffrey Epstein in 2011, and he says, "The dog that hasn't barked is Trump." The email goes on from there. We don't understand the context. What do you make of this?
I don't know. Not understanding the context of their conversation. And, of course, Jeffrey Epstein is dead, so we can't ask him himself what that means.
Except that it's coming from someone who has spent years as one of his most ferocious defenders. And it gets worse. When Greene suggested that Trump invite Epstein survivors to the Oval Office to give them a platform and acknowledge their suffering directly from the highest office in the land, she says he dismissed the idea entirely. His response, as she tells it, was that those men had done nothing to merit the honor. Think about that phrasing. Survivors of trafficking and abuse, people who endured horrors that most of us can't even imagine. And the response is that they haven't earned the privilege of a meeting. That's not the language of someone trying to protect victims. That's the language of someone who wants them to stay invisible, to keep their stories quiet.
There's many conversations in these emails. There's tens of thousands of pages. That email in particular came from the estate. We subpoenaed the estate on the oversight committee. I'm part of that investigation. So it would be good to have further information there. But there's many people. And, I've been looking at these emails, and I think it's a very interesting view into a world that most of us have never seen. It's like kind of like a web of global affairs, business connections, a very high and powerful people, foreign leaders, and it's just an interesting world, and even the intel community.
It is an interesting world. It makes me wonder, and I'll just put it baldly, do you think President Trump has something to hide here?
I don't, because I believe the women, and the women have said over and over again that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. Even Virginia Giuffre said it under oath, and she wrote it in her book. And so if we listen to the women, they say Donald Trump has done nothing wrong.
To not complicate the narrative with uncomfortable truths, Greene didn't stop there. She took to X, formerly Twitter, and laid it all out in brutal detail. She wrote that Trump called her a traitor for fighting to release the files and standing with women who were raped, jailed in stalls, and trafficked to men. Her words, not paraphrased, but direct quotes. Only evil people would hide this and protect those who participated. Evil. That's the word she chose to describe the man she helped elect, the man she defended through every controversy. And she claimed that Trump's attacks against her have actually fueled real threats against her personal safety, coming from what she describes as the most powerful individual in the world. Think about the journey that led to this moment.
Congresswoman Greene, Gayle King here. We're very excited to have you because we've been trying to get you for a while, so we're glad you finally said yes. We're delighted to talk to you.
Thank you.
But I wanted to talk to you about this shutdown. There's been a lot of controversy about it. Many people are glad that it's over, but many of the Democrats are still upset about the Obamacare payments, how that's ended up. You seem to be siding with the Democrats on this. At one point, Hakeem Jeffries called Marjorie Taylor Greene an ally. So I'm wondering how you feel about this. Are you surprised yourself that you're aligned with the Democrats on some of these issues? And President Trump says you seem to have lost your way. Can you respond to both about you?
Well, first of all, I haven't lost my way. I'm for the American people only. I'm America first, and I make no apologies about that to anyone. And as far as health insurance is concerned, it hurt my own family. Back in 2010, the Democrats passed Obamacare, and in 2014, when it went into effect, my family's health insurance premium went from $800 to over $2,400 a month. And we've seen the health insurance industry prices just go up and up.
Greene has spent years absorbing criticism from the left, from the media, from establishment Republicans, all without flinching. She's doubled down, pushed back, and refused to back down no matter how intense the backlash became. She's built her entire political identity on unwavering loyalty to Trump. So watching her turn that same unflinching bluntness directly onto him tells you that this isn't some calculated political move. This reads as genuine anger from someone who feels personally betrayed. But the story doesn't end with Epstein. Greene has now expanded her criticism into territory that would have been unthinkable just months ago. She's openly questioning whether Trump should remain in office. She's invoked the 25th Amendment, the constitutional mechanism for removing a president who is unable to discharge his duties. She's called his behavior around Iran, specifically his threats to wipe out an entire civilization, absolute madness. She's describing him as out of control, a former die-hard MAGA loyalist now openly wondering if the president needs to be removed from power. That's not a small break. That's a full-blown political earthquake happening right inside Trump's own base. So, how did we get here? How does someone go from being one of Trump's most aggressive defenders to accusing him of covering up abuse to protect powerful friends and then calling for his removal from office entirely? The answer lies in a series of events that Greene herself has described in detail, and understanding them requires going back to the beginning of this confrontation. The heart of the story is a private phone call that Greene describes in a profile that ran in the New York Times and was later picked up by other outlets. According to her account, she pushed Trump to fully release the Epstein case files and to publicly stand with survivors of trafficking. Trump, she says, didn't take that well at all. He yelled at her. He told her to drop the whole thing. And when she kept pressing, when she asked why he was so insistent on keeping those files buried, that's when he allegedly gave her that answer. My friends will get hurt. Picture that moment for a second. Two people who've been political allies for years on the phone, and instead of a calm policy conversation, it turns into Trump yelling at her to drop an issue she clearly cared deeply about. That alone tells you how sensitive this topic is inside his inner circle. And the fact that Greene kept pushing anyway, even after getting yelled at, and only stopped once she got that specific answer about his friends, suggests she wasn't just fishing for a headline. She wanted a real explanation. And according to her, she got one that stunned her enough to go public about it later. Now let's really think about what that statement means if it's accurate. Epstein's case has always been surrounded by questions about who else was involved, who else knew what was happening, which powerful people might be named in those files. For years, survivors and advocates have been demanding full transparency, arguing that justice requires exposing everyone connected to that abuse, not just the people who already face consequences. And here, according to one of Trump's own longtime allies, when directly asked why he opposed releasing those files, his answer wasn't about legal technicalities or ongoing investigations. It was about protecting people he personally knows. That's about as direct an admission as you could possibly get if it happened the way Greene describes it. And here's why that specific framing matters so much. If the excuse had been about protecting an ongoing investigation, or about legal complications, or about privacy laws, that's the kind of explanation people could at least debate on the merits. But my friends will get hurt isn't a legal argument. It's a personal one. It's an admission that the concern isn't about due process or the integrity of some investigation. It's about shielding specific individuals in his own circle from consequences. That's exactly the kind of thing survivors, advocates, and honestly, most regular people watching this story have suspected for years. And now, according to Greene, it's coming straight from Trump's own mouth. Then there's the Oval Office moment, which honestly might be just as damning in its own way. Greene suggested inviting survivors into the Oval Office, giving them a real platform, a real acknowledgement from the highest office in the country. And according to her, Trump's response was to dismiss it, saying those men hadn't done anything to merit the honor. Think about the coldness of that response for a second. These are people who survived trafficking and abuse, and the framing coming back is about whether they've earned recognition. That's not how you talk about people you actually want to protect. That's how you talk about people you'd rather not deal with at all. Now let's talk about how this all became public. Greene didn't just quietly vent about this in private. She went on X publicly and laid it all out. She wrote that Trump called her a traitor for fighting him on releasing the files and standing with women who were raped, jailed in stalls, and trafficked to men. And then she used that word again, evil, saying only evil people would hide this and protect those who participated. That's about as strong a public condemnation as you're going to hear from someone who spent years as one of Trump's most visible defenders. And it gets even more serious, because Greene says the consequences of speaking out haven't just been political. She claims Trump's attacks against her have actually fueled a surge in real threats to her safety. And she specifically points to what she calls the most powerful individual in the world as the source encouraging that pressure. The person she backed, the person she helped elect. Now, according to her, contributing to threats against her own safety because she pushed for transparency on Epstein. That's a genuinely serious allegation, and it shows just how personal and dangerous this rift has become. Not just a disagreement over policy, but something that's reportedly bled into real-world consequences for her. Think about the irony sitting inside that claim for a moment. Here's someone who spent years being one of the most visible, most combative defenders of Trump against attacks from the left, now saying that the very same political machinery she helped build is being turned against her because she pushed back on one specific issue. If true, that's a pretty stark illustration of what happens inside that movement when someone steps out of line. Even someone who's earned as much loyalty and trust as Greene has over the years. It suggests that the tolerance for dissent, even from longtime allies, is a lot thinner than most people probably assume. But Greene's break with Trump goes well beyond Epstein at this point. In an interview with Christiane Amanpour, Greene said Trump has abandoned what she calls America First policies, and described her own journey as evolving from a MAGA booster into a MAGA critic, while Trump, in her words, changed for the worse. She reiterated the whole Epstein confrontation directly in that interview too, saying Trump called her a traitor because she fought to release those files, and that she refused to obey his demands to remove her name from a discharge petition tied to getting those documents released. She also said plainly that Republicans should be doing a better job of holding him accountable. That's not language you hear from a loyal ally. That's language you hear from somebody who's genuinely broken with the person they used to defend. And then there's the piece of this story that takes things to an entirely different level. Her comments about Trump's mental fitness and the 25th Amendment. This came after Trump made comments threatening to, in his words, wipe out a whole civilization, in the context of the ongoing Iran conflict. Greene's response to that in an interview on CNN was blunt. She called it absolute madness and asked how any mentally stable person could call for an entire civilization of people to be murdered, describing it flatly as insanity. And she didn't stop at just criticizing the rhetoric. She told the interviewer she had formally called for Trump's removal from office, describing him as out of control and saying administration officials need to rein him in. Let's slow down on that phrase for a second. Wipe out a whole civilization. It's an extraordinary thing for any sitting president to say out loud, let alone in the context of an active foreign conflict. That's not typical diplomatic language. And it's not typical wartime rhetoric either, even from a president known for blunt, aggressive talk. It's the kind of statement that would normally draw immediate, sharp criticism from basically everyone across the political spectrum. And here, instead of staying quiet or offering some kind of careful, measured response, Greene went straight to calling it insanity, and straight to invoking a constitutional mechanism specifically designed for situations where a president may no longer be fit to serve. Think about the weight of that statement for a second. This isn't a Democrat making that call. This isn't someone who spent years opposing Trump politically. This is one of his own, someone from deep inside the MAGA movement, publicly stating that she believes the president is out of control and should be removed from office. That's about as dramatic a break as you can possibly have inside a political movement. And remember, the 25th Amendment isn't some vague political talking point. It's an actual constitutional process, one that's rarely invoked seriously, precisely because it's meant for extreme situations where a president's capacity to serve is genuinely in question. For Greene to call for that specific tool, rather than just criticizing a policy decision or a bad speech, tells you she's not treating this as a normal political disagreement. She's framing it as something far more serious, a question about whether the person sitting in the Oval Office is currently fit to hold that responsibility at all. And there's one more piece of this worth mentioning, because it actually adds credibility to everything else Greene has said. In that same CNN interview, she acknowledged her own past behavior, specifically a controversial post from a few years back showing a gun next to photos of progressive congresswomen. She admitted that criticism of that post was fair and said she wanted to humbly apologize for participating in what she called toxic politics, saying it's detrimental to the country. That kind of self-reflection matters here because it shows Greene isn't just going after Trump while pretending she's always been perfect. She's owning her own past mistakes while also raising serious concerns about his current behavior, which honestly makes the whole account feel a lot more credible than if she just launched into pure attack mode with zero self-awareness. This is where the story becomes genuinely historic. We are witnessing something that political scientists will study for years: the unraveling of one of the most loyal relationships in modern American politics, happening in real time in full public view. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the woman who once wore a Trump won sash on the floor of Congress, who amplified his claims of election fraud, who defended him through every scandal, is now calling him evil and saying he should be removed from office. That's not just a headline, that's a turning point. The question everyone is asking now is whether Greene's break will be an isolated incident or the beginning of a broader exodus. Are there other Trump allies who share her concerns but haven't yet spoken out? Are there other loyalists who have seen the same behavior, heard the same comments, and felt the same unease, but lack the courage to break ranks? Greene's public rupture has opened a door, and it's entirely possible that others will follow. Because when someone as prominent and as deeply embedded in the movement as Greene reaches this point publicly, using words this strong, it sends a signal to everyone else watching that the cost of loyalty might have become too high. The "my friends will get hurt" quote is the single most explosive piece of this entire story. If Greene's account is accurate, that's a direct admission that Trump opposed releasing the Epstein files specifically to protect people close to him. Not because of any legal or procedural concern. That's exactly the kind of statement survivors and advocates have been dreading for years. The fear that transparency is being blocked to shield powerful people connected to Epstein's crimes, rather than to protect any legitimate ongoing process. And that fear isn't new. It's been the central question hanging over the entire Epstein saga for years now, long before Greene ever went public with this account. Who else knew? Who else was involved? Whose names might show up in those files that never got released? Greene's account doesn't answer all of those questions directly, but it does something almost as significant. It suggests from someone inside Trump's own circle that the resistance to releasing those files has a personal dimension to it, not just a bureaucratic one. That's a seismic shift in the narrative. Because for years, the official explanations for withholding Epstein-related documents have been procedural. The investigation is ongoing. Privacy concerns, national security. But Greene's account cuts through all of that and offers a much simpler, much darker explanation. Trump didn't want those files released because they would hurt people he considers friends. This is a genuine crack inside the MAGA movement, not some outside attack. Greene has spent years as one of Trump's most aggressive defenders. When someone with that history starts calling him a traitor, accusing him of evil, and saying he's out of control, all in the same stretch of public statements, that's not political theater. That's a real personal ideological break happening in public view. And it's the kind of split that other Republicans and voters are absolutely going to notice. And it's worth remembering just how unusual this kind of break really is. Politicians switch positions on policy all the time. But this is different. This is somebody who built a huge part of her national profile on unwavering loyalty to one specific person, now publicly using words like evil and traitor and out of control to describe that same person. That's not a small pivot. That's a complete reversal of the entire foundation her political identity was built on. And it didn't happen quietly. It happened in full public view on major networks, in her own words. Greene's shift isn't limited to Epstein. She's tying it to a broader pattern, accusing Trump of abandoning the America First policy she originally supported him for, and directly connecting his handling of Epstein to his rhetoric on Iran. Both situations in her framing point to the same underlying problem. A president she believes has changed for the worse and is no longer being held accountable by the people around him. That connection matters because it turns this from a single isolated controversy into something she's describing as a pattern. It's not just one bad phone call about Epstein, and it's not just one alarming comment about Iran. In her telling, these are two data points in a larger trend, evidence that something has genuinely shifted in how Trump operates, and evidence that the people around him aren't doing enough to push back when it matters most. The 25th Amendment comment is about as serious as political rhetoric gets. Calling for a sitting president's removal isn't something anyone does casually, and it's especially significant coming from someone who spent years defending him. Whether or not that call ever goes anywhere procedurally, the fact that it's coming from inside Trump's own political base sends a powerful signal about how serious some of his former allies believe this situation has become. So why does this matter for you watching right now? A few big reasons. First, this story connects directly to years of public anger and confusion around the Epstein case. People have been demanding transparency for a long time, wanting to know who else was involved, who else might be protected by silence. Greene's account, if accurate, suggests that transparency has been blocked specifically to protect people close to power, which is exactly the outcome survivors and advocates have feared the entire time, going all the way back to when the case first became national news. Second, this shows a real fracture forming inside the Republican Party and the broader MAGA movement. When one of the most loyal, most outspoken figures inside that movement turns into a public critic, calling for accountability and even removal, that's the kind of split that can ripple outward, shaping how other Republicans and eventually voters view Trump's leadership going forward, especially heading into the next round of major elections. Third, this ties together some genuinely alarming threats. Protection of powerful figures connected to abuse allegations, extreme rhetoric around a war overseas, and public questions about a sitting president's mental fitness for office. Any one of those on its own would be a major story. Having a single former ally raise all three at once is about as serious as political criticism gets. And when you step back and look at all three of those threads together, protection of the powerful, extreme rhetoric about war, and open questions about fitness for office, you start to see why this particular break matters so much more than a typical political dispute. These aren't small policy disagreements about tax rates or spending priorities. These are questions about accountability, about safety, and about whether the country's leadership is being handled responsibly at the highest level. When those questions come from someone who used to defend that same leadership without hesitation, that's the kind of moment that tends to stick with people long after the news cycle moves on. So here's where we leave it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once one of Trump's fiercest defenders, is now publicly accusing him of trying to cover up the Epstein files to protect his friends, calling his handling of the situation evil, and openly questioning whether he should even remain in office. That's not a small disagreement. That's a genuine dramatic break playing out in public from deep inside Trump's own political movement. And it's a break that raises questions well beyond just these two individuals. If someone as loyal, as combative, and as deeply embedded in the movement as Greene has reached this point publicly on camera, using words this strong, it's worth asking how many other people inside that same circle might be feeling similarly, even if they haven't said so out loud yet. Political loyalty built on years of shared battles doesn't usually crack overnight without something significant underneath it. And this kind of public rupture tends to open the door for others to start speaking more freely, too. That's exactly why you need to keep watching this story. Because when cracks this deep start forming inside a movement, they rarely stay quiet for long. The fallout from this one is just getting started, and it will be fascinating to see who else steps forward, what other revelations emerge, and how Trump and his remaining allies respond to a threat that has emerged not from the outside, but from within their own ranks. The political landscape is shifting beneath our feet, and this story is far from over.